here is Jesse Waters. They really have been on working overtime to justify this and again, remember, like, this is how it works, right? At first, it was like, we don't want CRT, a college level course being taught to fourth graders because it's not age appropriate. And then it was, well, we also don't want certain aspects of history to be taught. In fact, we don't want any aspects of history that would in any way make, other like white people feel like, gosh, America isn't 100% great. I feel a little bad about that.
That's now called empathy, by the way. That's called empathy. That's called empathy that kids might experience, and that's what they need to protect them from feeling empathy.
And now it has moved on to, like, we need to dictate really what the dynamic was in slavery, and it wasn't just all bad. There was room, there was boarding, there was you get some like skill set. Here's Jesse Waters carrying that water, as it were.
Oh, I know, Jesse, you don't have to fact check every racial hoax from MSNBC, and I usually don't. If I did, I'd do it for the whole hour. But now that the vice president is involved, Kamala Harris, I got to do it. So here's how it got started. Florida's Board of Ed came out with their new Black History curriculum.
Pause it for 1 second. Can I just say, and this has nothing to do with anything, but Jesse Waters has been imitating Bill O'Reilly since the day that he was allowed to sit down and put a suit on that network. However, he's also imitating Donald Trump. So you get this weird hand gestures that are a combination of here. We come back to me. You got this thing here. You got this thing, and then you got this, which is the Bill O'Reilly. The big. How does that go, Matt?
Lieutenant Andrea Bocelli.
Bocelli.
Oh.
Here we go. Go ahead.
Oh, I know, Jesse, you don't have to fact check every racial hoax from MSNBC, and I usually don't. If I did, I'd do it for the whole hour.
Imagine being a person thinking that.
Now that the vice president is involved, Kamala Harris, I got to do it. So here's how it got started. Florida's Board of Ed came out with their new Black History curriculum. Primetime looked at the curriculum. It's rigorous, it's in depth, it should be like that. It covers the darkest parts of American history, how slaves were shackled and trafficked from Africa, broken by their masters, and forced into atrocious conditions. But that's not all it covers. It's a brutally honest depiction of American slavery, the institution, and therefore covers slavery from the perspective of the slave instead of just from the perspective of the master. The curriculum includes how black slaves were able to use their experience, in some cases, to make their brutally hard lives better. The course examines the various duties and trades performed by slaves, like agricultural work, painting, carpentry, tailoring, domestic service, blacksmithing, transportation. Instruction includes how slaves developed skills which, in some instances, could be applied for their personal benefit. That's the section everyone's freaking out about, especially Kamala Harris. No one is arguing slaves benefited from slavery. No one is saying that. It's not true. They're teaching how black people developed skills during slavery, in some instances, that could be applied for their own personal benefit.
No one's saying that, and now I'm going to say it.
They're, as a person, they're owned. Like, their personal benefit doesn't exist the way my personal benefit exists.
Yes, right. The personal benefit when you have, like, when you are not a free person, when you are a property, means that the property owner is the one that benefits.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, and also, I love how Fox News is trying to jump on Kamala Harris, too. We just played that Gutfeld segment from The Five. We've said this a few times on the show that, like, their conspiracy theories about the Biden crime family don't stick because he's just like this boring old white guy, and they had decades and decades to build up stuff against Hillary Clinton. She's a woman. Obama, of course, scary Muslim, middle name, whatever, black guy. But for Biden, he's just nothing is like really landing, and they almost wish, I think, Kamala Harris was more public facing so they could go after her in like racist and sexist ways.
Without a doubt.
I mean, the fact that she weighed in on this in one area is, you know, that they're going to jump on it. I just don't think it's very good or effective.
The other fascinating thing about this, too, is that the implication is that none of these people who were enslaved would have any skills but for being enslaved. Like, you would never say just generally, like, you know, I don't know, the process of like taking the, you know, the Nina and the Pinta, I can't remember all the
Santa
ships,
Maria.
you know, that they a brutal trip across the ocean, but they also took the time to learn how to juggle or something like this. I mean, the idea, the implication that were it not for being enslaved, that these people would have never learned any skills that would have been to their personal benefit. Like, when people live and exist, they learn skills that are to their personal benefit. It is not a function, you know, what skills they learn may have changed because they didn't have a choice because they were slaves. But the idea that being enslaved gave them more access to learning personal skills as opposed to being free is just like a lie.
It obscures the entire context. And reading William Byrd, Slaver in Virginia in the 1700s, you can read him talk about the skills of his black slaves, like the coopers, for instance. The cooper, that name comes from people who make barrels and, you know, like binding a barrel together in the wood and stuff like that. And some of his slaves got really good at doing that. And you know what happens? They don't get to use it for their personal benefit. That makes them valuable so they can be traded by their slave owner for another guy who needs barrels.
It drives up their price.
But the argument is that if any of these slaves lived during an era when they would be freed, right? I mean, around emancipation, or if by chance they had a benevolent master who would set them free, or if they could escape, that then the idea is then those skills could be used to further their ability to what, right? I mean, I am sure that there are people like, I became a really wealthy blacksmith after learning to be a blacksmith as a slave. I am sure there is maybe a story like that, where, but it is the idea that this is a historic, that these, you know, all of it, all the aspects of it, the fact that it implies they wouldn't learn skills that had personal benefit to them,
that they were savages and just needed to learn. The white people, you know, it was bad how they did it, but we civilized them. That's
the implication. I mean, because there is no experience that any human being has ever gone through where they didn't learn something that would benefit them later. You know, it's just absurd.
Yes. Yeah. It also, I just want to add, it feeds into their bootstraps theory kind of ideology, which is that as long as you teach someone how to fish, once they were no longer, you know, property, what this provides for them is like the ability to go out and be business owners. And the fact that, you know, they didn't do so once the slavery ended, yada, yada, yada. I mean, doesn't that say something kind of pathologically about black people? They just the skills don't take to them in the same way. I mean,
the implicit message that it served a civilizing function was also the implicit reason behind the maintenance of Jim Crow for the whole generations after it.
Yep. We should say that a lot of the success, particularly in those, in those slave states, a lot of the success was then subsequently ripped back in the form of, terrorism, for lack of a better word.
Yes.
But
You just need to take the Tulsa massacre for as an example. The one that is currently the head of education in that state is saying that it should be taught that it had nothing to do with the color of people's skin.
And other massacres too, like the Rosewood massacre and the Ocoee massacre. Another provision in the guidelines is to highlight that there was violence by black people in those massacres as well.
Both sides.
Yeah, just to indicate that it wasn't a white led race riot against black people.